Hi, and welcome to this webinar called How to Become an Effective Co-Creator in Your Life and Ditch All the Other Crap. Um, this is going to be a fairly short webinar, so sit back and relax, and you're going to pick up some incredible tips on how to create the life that you want using conscious thought, using your ability to think to make new choices in your life. And before I introduce myself and who I am and what I'm doing here, I just want to ask you a question. Do you have a say in the choices that you make in your life? Did you choose what to wear today? Or did someone or something choose it for you? Because if you didn't choose either, if you didn't think you chose either, then your choices are all being made for you, aren't they? Including what you're going to be eating 5 days from now, which seems ridiculous because surely you have some sort of choice in that. However, if you think that's true, if you think you don't actually have any choice, any control over the thoughts that come into your head, we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Then roll on, happy days. There's nothing for you to do. Sit back and relax and just let fate take over. Alternatively, perhaps you believe that you do have some semblance of control in the choices that you make. If I told you to kick yourself right now, for instance, you might well decide not to do so. Now, if you did do that, I didn't make you do it. Neither did any other entity make you do it. You decided to either do it or not do it, which is called free will. And even if you believe in a deterministic and mechanic world of electrons, which are being formed from matter, which have no say in anything, perhaps we're just genes fighting for survival, and that's all there is to it. But whatever your standpoint is, there remains a fact. Who or whatever is doing this choosing is doing so in your body and with your mind, and whatever it is that it is doing this, let's call it conscious awareness. It's doing it in your lifetime. So the purpose of this webinar is to talk about choices. Let's talk about the choices that you can make, because your life is a series of choices that you've made, and then the feedback loops in the world around you based on the choices that you've made. And how you feel about this life is what's going to give you an experience of it in the form of your awareness. And we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail. So whilst you're here in this life, as a caretaker of consciousness, what if there was a better way to live your life? What if there was a better way to live out, to play out this magnificent thing called life? This one life that you have, as far as we know. There's no point in arguing about truth. Let's talk about what's useful. Because whatever and however we are doing the creating, you're doing it anyway. So why not learn the secret to become better at it, whatever the it is? Yeah. Why not learn how to enjoy your existence, to learn a way to create a matrix for making better choices? Yeah, to enjoy your life more as a result, and to deal with and overcome some of the following: depression, anxiety, overwhelm, procrastination, addictions such as smoking, drinking, drugs, gambling, overeating, etc. Stress, lack of motivation, poor relationships, bad communication, lack of purpose, lack of sleep, lack of confidence. I mean, I could go on. The list is endless. But you see, there's a way of dealing with these problems and making your life more enjoyable as a result. And it involves tapping into the creative potential on offer in any given moment, which is available to everyone. And it involves aligning with the rules of the game, as Einstein said, and playing them better than anyone else. And what's more, it's all taking place within you. Okay, this body that you've been holding onto for all these years has everything it already needs within it to make you live a happy and healthy life. If only you knew how to make it work properly. So in this webinar, you'll learn precisely how to do that, and how to align with what you already have and what is already out there. How to make the best life you can possibly live with the one life you have in the one body you've got, and enjoy the time you've been given to the max. So keep listening and find out how. Okay. Thank you for joining me on this webinar. My name is Damian Locksmith. I am a best-selling author and TEDx speaker. Having been doing my second TEDx talk in April in Malvern, based on this subject as conscious creators. And 8 years ago, I was a very successful art director, but I was miserable, and I had OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and depression, anxiety, and stress issues. And I came across an understanding of how the human mind works, which I'll talk about in a bit. And fairly recently, I've managed to match that up with how the human body works and combine the two to make your mind and body more aligned, so that you are in tune with the universe and the potential of the universe in any given moment. And it's one of the reasons I'm fit and healthy and very, very happy and very resilient. And you can be too. And so my first book, called Do Nothing, is about how we trust our thinking at the wrong time. My second book is about transferring that into the creative potential. It's called the Entrepreneur Success Formula. Both of my TED Talks are about purpose and transferring that energy. I do global webinars and global retreats on energy and consciousness engineering, and talks in places like Mexico and Portugal and Greece and Cape Verde. And yeah, and I'm here to kind of guide you through. Basically, this webinar is kind of a how-to, but it's also going to give you some really useful information on what you can do to actually change your thoughts. Okay, so all right, on with the show. Okay, so humans are an integral part of nature. I mean, the mind, body, and brain are intrinsically connected to each other in the environment that created it. I mean, it doesn't matter what you think about evolution, or what you think about materialism, or why we're here, or spiritualism. The fact is, we are here, and we are interacting with our environment. So the way that we interact with our environment obviously is going to be crucial in our success within it. Yeah. So from the day we're born, the cells in our body process huge quantities of data coming in from both the inside and also coming in from the outside and generated from the inside. And we give it meaning, either consciously or unconsciously. As babies, very much, this is a process. We are picking up on this energy, but we are probably not consciously aware of what we're doing. We certainly don't know how to put it into words. And obviously later on, as we learn language, we have the ability to put it into language that makes sense and we can communicate with others. But from an early age, we're communicating by crying, for instance. So we have innate responses to this data, such as survival instincts, knowing when and how to get milk from your mother, and how to swim straight out of the womb. These are reflex actions to our environment. We've also evolved learned capacities or capabilities, which are perceptions and responses to our environment, such as reacting to hot surfaces. Obviously, fire is only a fairly new invention. So the way that we process this information is absolutely key to the way that we interact with the environment, because how we think about these events affects our mental and physical capabilities to deal with them in future. If you think about the first time you touched a hot stove, it was giving you the feedback to say this is not a good thing to do if you want to survive. So we tend not to do it again. Okay. In Kelly McGonigal's TED Talk on stress, which I'll put the link in on this on the movie, she highlights how we think about stress is the key to our physiological reaction to it. So if we think of stress as useful, our body's reaction to it can make us healthier. This is absolutely critical, because how we think about life is actually the most important factor in our interaction with it. So for instance, as a baby reacting to something in its environment, if it reacts in a fearful way, it will take that emotion and it will turn it into a physical reaction. So for instance, maybe the first time it got shouted at when it went to touch a plug. Yeah. So how we think about life is the most important factor in our interaction with it. And this affects our future mental and physical capabilities and performance as a result. So the meaning and quality of our lives, therefore, stems from the meaning we give to it moment to moment. And this is happening via our thinking. There is a reason why all of my talks and all of my books are about thought. So let's have a look at what thought is, or how thinking works. So, what is a thought? Well, brains are made from 100 billion neurons. I didn't count them all individually, that fire and wire together around 200 to 1,000 times a second to form activity patterns. That's the general consensus for what they do. However, we are only conscious of a very small fraction of this activity, and in response to it, the brain emits neurotransmitters that produce a physiological response by the body in the form of emotions. This is why you have an emotional reaction to events. You are not actually having an emotional reaction to an event, you're having an emotional reaction to the thought about the event. Okay, this is crucial, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Anyway, this is the start of the meaning process for human beings. A bit more further clarification on the physical process is required before we tackle meaning, as thinking affects our DNA. Everyone knows what DNA is. It's the blueprint for our body. It's what goes to make up our body, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Just as like a side note, it's unclear as to where the limits of the physical self and the psychological self begin and end. So, for instance, I've worked with doctors who've worked in hospitals, and have said that, you know, when the body dies, the soul definitely leaves the body, but we don't know what the soul is. We just know it's a formless part of being human. You know, there is nothing in the materialistic world that shows how electrons bumping into electrons can create consciousness, but it does. Okay. In the cases of neuroplasticity, after extreme physical trauma, it shows that it's possible for the brain to function with less than 5% of the normal structure still intact. So, I mean, there's one person that actually went on to get an MBA from Oxford with just a tiny part of his brain still intact. Neuroplasticity meant that his brain changed to reform and redo the functions that the other part of the brain was missing. But we can ascertain from this that we're not hardwired. And it could be posited that we're far more than our physical form, but we won't go into that here. For the moment, we're going to stick to the physiological side of it. So, how thinking affects the physical body. So, although our DNA contains the blueprint for our potential future physiology, epigenetics, which is the study of heritable phenotype changes that do not involve alterations in the DNA sequence, shows us that how we interact with our environment is key to how this DNA is used. If we put cells in an unhealthy environment, such as a petri dish containing toxins, they're going to get sick. And we're a living community of trillions of cells. So if we're placed in toxic environments like Chernobyl, we too will get sick. This is widely understood and accepted. Actually calls into questions why humans would be so adept at making our own environment so toxic, but that's another question. We're also capable of making our own more local environment, i.e. the body, sick as well, and we do this by the way we think. We'll talk about the placebo effect later on. Our thinking can upregulate and downregulate genes. Right, so thoughts signal proteins that determine which genes are turned on and off. And as per the research by Kelly McGonigal, how we think about life and what meaning we give to it determines our physical health as well as our mental health. But as we can't control the next thought that comes into our heads, I'll put the link to a neuroscience and free will video here. The only semblance of control that we have in this process is what we do with these thoughts once they've arrived, or how our brains respond to the electrical activity of thought. Therefore, how we think about the thoughts we receive is dependent on the meaning that we're giving to them. And this meaning is filtered by our beliefs. And this is picked up again from our experience, which is picked up from our thoughts about events, etc. And this stems from probably in the womb, right, before we're even born. So how we react to life through our thinking is guiding us in all future interactions with it. So studies into the placebo effect show that what we believe to be true can have a significant impact on our mental and physical well-being, and what we believe determines how we react to these thoughts. So we're now in a loop. We're now in a loop. thoughts create feelings, feelings create thoughts, thoughts create feelings, and you know, so how do we interact with this loop? This is the big question now. Well, let's start by looking at beliefs. So what are beliefs? So a belief is something we consider to be a truth or a fact, and beliefs can be empowering or limiting in nature, as they act as both a conscious and subconscious guide to our actions, kind of like an autopilot. They can be formed either through an intense physical and emotional response to a trigger, such as the touching of the hot stove, or through repetitive thinking, which fires and wires nerve synapses together over time. Yeah, so this is where brainwashing would come in. Some people are afraid of spiders, right? This is a learned belief, probably caused by our parents shouting at us the first time we went to go for it because they were scared of spiders. But most of our core beliefs are formed when we're children, because between the ages of 0 and about 8, our brains function like sponges. When we're very young, we're less able to discern between truth and fiction, and are heavily influenced by what we experience due to our brains operating in the lower alpha, theta, and delta frequencies. So in all these cases, we create a feedback loop of trigger, response, emotion. That can be regarded as our experience, right? So trigger, response, emotion, and the trigger is the thought. Don't forget, there is a correlation, not causation, between the outside events and our experience of it. We'll go into that in a bit more detail in a bit. So our brains are continually reorganizing neurons according to the way that we react to these experiences. So we're constantly running feedback loops and checking in with these experiences to determine whether they fit in with our current view of the world. Yeah. This is delivered by previous thinking, feeling, response. Beliefs are essentially a series of these feedback loops played over and over again until they feel true for us. And as we build up these experiences, we use these beliefs to then guide us both consciously and unconsciously in our next responses. So we are now into this loop cycle. This is how we create response. This is how we create beliefs. This is how we create responses. This is how we react to the world through our thinking. So let's just have a quick look at habits and addictions, because some of the stuff we talked about in the beginning, it's unwanted habits that we want to talk about here. And I'm not sure if you're aware of the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, who has worked with heroin addicts in Canada extensively. And in his work on addiction, he draws on cutting edge science and real life stories to show that it's a coping mechanism to deal with emotional pain or emotional loss, and it's not actually a disease. Pain relievers such as opiates and alcohol, gambling, sex, overeating, etc., trigger endorphins in the brain as a form of sedation. So substances are not addictive. Instead, you require a susceptible individual who wishes to change their feeling state on a regular basis. These addictive behaviors originate as a way of coping with a traumatic emotional loss or some sort of emotional loss. It doesn't matter what it is, right? It's something that's triggered this, right? This makes sense when we take into account the feedback loops that we've already talked about, as our bodies react to these emotional responses created by the neurotransmitters. Yeah. Experiences that register highly are then more likely to form a memorable experience, as emotions solidify memories. I mean, everyone remembers where they were when the 9/11 attacks happened, or President Kennedy's assassination, the generation prior to this one. It's because it formed a huge emotional response. It's been shown that rejection from someone close to us is the same chemical triggers in the anterior cingulate cortex as actual physical pain. The body treats them both as a traumatic event. So when we feel uncomfortable with this experience, because don't forget, it's all an experience through thought, trigger, trigger, response, emotion, that's when we look for ways to break our feeling state, such as using substances to anesthetize the pain or create an alternative feeling state through an action, right? So, for instance, going to the gym releases endorphins, serotonin, etc. So, but without dealing with the initial source of the emotional loss, we're attempting to manufacture a break in the loop and a temporary reprieve, but it's not permanent. To make significant lasting changes to this feedback loop, we either need to have another impactful thought, feeling, response, which comes in the way of an insight, which we'll talk about in a minute, or find a way to bypass this process altogether and change the subconscious mental programming. And this is why hypnosis, NLP, CBT, energy work such as EFT have been shown to be effective as remedial measures. It makes sense now because they are breaking that feedback loop. I'm going to suggest another way in a minute, which you will find very, very useful and is working with all my clients. But just talk about innate health for a minute, because there's the first part of that equation, which is having an insight which changes everything. So in the first book that I wrote, Do Nothing, I highlighted an approach to dealing with this feedback loop that is also proving very successful in therapeutic environments as a way to generate new thoughts and new emotion. It's called innate health, or the 3 principles. And it points to the realization that all experience is created via thought, brought to life by consciousness, and that mental health and well-being are available in any given moment, as we already have everything we need to be mentally healthy. That's where we started. A new feeling is delivered via an insight or a new thought, which breaks the feedback loop as a new realization creates a new emotional state. All makes sense based on what we've already talked about. The 3 principles are just a description of how humans create their own version of reality through their thinking. Yeah, we all experience life through thought. It's only delivered via thought. Now, just seeing that as true. So, for instance, everything you experience in your world right now is happening within you in your thinking. I know it seems a bit weird and it seems a little bit strange, but you look outside of the trees. The experience of those trees is not happening out there; it's happening in your head as a thought. Okay, that realization that it's all happening through thinking, it can be enough to trigger a huge insight. So, for instance, someone who might think they're experiencing pain in the outside world has the realization that they're only ever experiencing their thinking about what's happening in the outside world through their thinking. It's all happening within them, and that experience can change with the next thought. Very simple, very simple. Broken down to its very simple components, the 3 principles are: we are alive, we think, and we feel, or aware of those thoughts. Right? That's the process. We have a thought, we're aware of it in consciousness, we experience it, we feel it. That's our version of reality. Now that means that there's 7.5 billion different versions of reality going on at any given moment. It's why you can go and watch a film with someone, be watching the same film, come out afterwards, you loved it, they hated it. It's because you have a different experience of the same product. The same things happening in the outside world, 7.5 billion different versions of that, because it's all happening within our heads. Now that's a huge insight to have. To even know that that's possible can be life-changing for people. Just to see that this continual process of reality creation is going on in our heads all the time, from the moment we're born until the moment we die, and we live in a world of thought. I mean, this is huge, but it also points to our ability to have a new thought and a new experience in any given moment. New thinking and insight then breaks the feedback loop and gives us a new version of reality, which is a new belief. Okay, so by pointing to our innate wellness, or simply being okay with not being okay, knowing that we are one thought away from being okay, is one way to accept our feeling state and not resort to pain relief. Knowing this is coming entirely from thought and is only temporary is another. Now, this has been really, really effective for a lot of my clients, but some have not had that road to Damascus moment, and they've not had that insight which changed everything. And therefore I felt responsible for their well-being, even though I'm not. But I wanted to come up with a different way to help them with their pain. And this is where I started to look at hacking the system. So let's talk about hacking the system. Our ability to heal our physical bodies via our thinking has been studied at great length by Dr. Joe Dispenza, amongst others, author of You Are Placebo. um, and Becoming Supernatural, fantastic books. He uses EEG machines, electroencephalograph machines, to monitor the thought patterns of students as they go into deep meditative states and reprogram their subconscious. And this work is forming a bridge between the remedial interventions I've mentioned before, such as hypnosis, and the understanding of our innate health from the three principles. And it's a way to hack the system. And what I'm calling it is consciousness engineering. Because I work with my own clients by exposing their emotional pain first, work of Gabor Mate, identifying the habits that are no longer serving them, and then we break the feedback loop of emotional habits and behaviors through creating a new experience based on a future reality. Okay. We imagine this future reality and we take the body into this new reality to experience these new emotions. Experience them as if they're real, as if they're actually current, creating a new feedback loop. Because once the physical self has experienced this in real time, it knows it's possible, belief, to achieve it. And using meditation and guided practices, I'm using kaleidoscopes, overlaid kaleidoscopes and meditation, deep meditations, and subconscious reprogramming. We're installing the new software in the mind and we're creating a new personality and taking the body to this new reality. So I create bespoke meditations for my clients and integrate them with the latest VR virtual reality technology, and also use Delta audio to drop the brainwaves into Delta in the music played in the background. So this was my hope for you, to introduce you to this new model of consciousness creation, and to show you that it's actually possible to break out of the habit loops. First of all, what are the habit loops? And hopefully I've explained that. You might have to watch this again. I know I speak very fast, but watching, seeing how these are created. And I've shown you that, you know, from the day you're born until using this thought and this feedback mechanism, and we create the emotion through the neurotransmitters, and this is what gives us the experience. And then we register that, we take it as a new belief, and then we then process everything through these new beliefs. And this is what makes our version of reality different from everyone else's, until we have an insight seeing that it's all thought created, which can change it in the moment. Or we go in and we change the system. We change the conscious programming, change the subconscious programming. We do it by creating a new reality, going in there, feeling what it's like to be there, knowing that it exists, and then taking the body physiologically into the new reality and then mentally with it. So this is how I do it. This is how I work with my clients. If you want to work with me to hack the system, to break free of all of that crap that was at the top of this webinar, and to improve the matrix for your own decision making. This is what it's about. It's like planting a seed in fertile soil. If you put fantastic fertile soil out there, you're going to get a strong, healthy plant. If you put rubbish clay out there, you're going to get a weak plant. This is about improving the soil to make sure that the thoughts that come in, whatever thought it is, you have a better chance of dealing with that thought in a different way. That's all it's about, because you don't choose the next thought that comes into your head, but you do get to decide what to do with it. And if you improve the odds and improve the matrix for your own decision making, then you will be able to improve your decision making. I mean, I don't make crap decisions anymore. You know, I prepared my body and my mind to deal with rubbish thinking. It makes you so resilient and able to deal with things, and it changes. It's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. So if you want to join me in hacking the system and improving your own decision making matrix, please click on the link underneath this video, and I've also got the link on this video as well, to become one of my clients, and we can set up our first session and start changing your world. And believe you me, it's doable, because my clients are doing it now, and they're breaking free of some pretty ingrained habits, you know, decades worth of habits, and it's happening. We're changing it. So thanks very much for watching and listening, and speak to you soon. Bye now.